With that, we'll go ahead and open the mic for questions from our members. Yes, sir. And just make your way to the microphone when you guys have a question. Go ahead.
Okay, microphone. It's a group of small questions around one subject, and it's trees. And by the way, thank you for having this tonight. It's been great for everyone, and thank you for the salute to the military, because I served 30-something years in the military, so I appreciate that. The question is basically that we don't know when you decide to cut trees that are close to power lines. It would be nice to have advance notice. It would be nice to have something that gave us the regulations and rules, because I've gone out and talked to those people you contract with, and sometimes we have a real communications issue. And we've lost about 4 huge trees because of the way they've cut the trees and the way they measure how far down they cut. So can we get some kind of material from you that advance notice, some material that tells us the rules and how they measure those things? Because the way they measure them, they pull the line down, they cut 10 feet or 15 feet or whatever it is, the line goes back up and it's 20 feet. So trees are a proven factor in, I'm not a tree hugger, but I like trees, and they are a proven factor in helping energy, because if they're close to the house and et cetera, et cetera. So just how you determine all that would be a big help.
Let me make sure, before you leave the mic, let me make sure I've got this. The critical first thing was having advance notice before we
absolutely
trim trees.
How you determine when you're going to trim them.
I heard you say that you lost 4 trees, that the communications around that was not good.
Right.
But then the method that the tree is trimmed in terms of, did you say that the line was pulled down?
They put a measuring pole up there, right, and they drop it down, and they say, well, it's got to be a certain percentage.
Now I see what you're
then
saying.
When they take the pole off, it goes back up about 5 or 6 feet.
Okay.
So I'm not clear on how that works.
Well, let me tell you what I do know, and I may get, do we have Lonnie Woods or Brian Flagey here who could speak to a little more detail about this? Because what we do with our right-of-way, and that's what this is involved with, is we actually have a 5-year plan on all of our circuits. Well, what we've actually found out in the last several years is that while we would like to cut an entire circuit and then not touch it for 5 years again, I've just absolutely been amazed how fast a hackberry tree can grow. And what we have found is that we may get everything else trimmed and it will stay down. And a hackberry with this kind of growing energy, just like this year, it might get back into the line. So one of the things that we're really struggling with is not just trying to maintain, because it is expensive to take the crews and move them around to hot spots. When we can get the guys working on a circuit from substation out or just a particular circuit, it's a lot more cost effective for us, and we're trying to manage a certain amount of dollars to get the trees trimmed. It's a particular challenge. And what I don't know right now, what I'd like to do is get your name, is find out a little more information about, okay, Lonnie, is that something that you can help speak to as far as the notice on tree trimming? Yeah, okay. Let me introduce this guy's Lonnie Woods. Lonnie is our Director of Operations. He oversees all of our linemen, our system operator, the dispatchers. He oversees our right-of-way. And he can provide a little bit more information on in particular, the notice or any details about our right-of-way.
We send out a notice beforehand, before we come on your property. As I understand, you were not notified. Our practice is to give everybody plenty of notice that we are going to be on your property ahead of time before we show up. We have several crews. Obviously, we want to make you aware that we're going to be there. For whatever reason, I don't know, I can't speak to why you did not, but we do have a procedure in place to cover that. What I'd like to do is get your name and address,
yeah,
and I'll make sure I follow up personally on it and get you an answer. Would that be okay? We have a certified arborist on staff, and the trees are cut according to his specifications. It used to be, or it's not just a bunch of linemen coming out and cut your trees. We're very descriptive cut. We don't want to kill your tree, and to do that, you've got to cut it a certain way. And I'm not an arborist, I can't say, but I can certainly get. Okay. Okay. I understand. Okay. But I promise you I'll follow up. If I can get your name and address, and I'll get you an answer. Okay.
And let's follow up on two things. I mean, one is I definitely want to follow up the notice, because what I heard you say was, I mean, the notice is sent, but you guys didn't get it. Okay, right. And we definitely want to follow up on that. And then the other thing is probably get Brian to go out and visit with them.
What I'll do is I'll get our arborist to come visit you and talk to you about our process, okay? Thank you very much.
Please be sure to get your name and contact information to Lonnie.
Hi, my name's Cindy Leland. I'm from Ponder, and we live outside of Ponder, and yet around us we can see 9 gas wells. We have to go send clear down into Louisville to get propane delivered out to us. And when I asked the gas companies if we could get the gas lines run to our community, we were told we had to get in touch with CoServ. We get our electricity from CoServ, but we don't get gas service. And we're talking $700 and $800 for the gas guy to come out from Louisville to deliver propane every 2 to 3 months. And I understand we're an older community and everything like that, but the gas wells are sitting there. You guys can drill under our house, but you can't run us gas.
Is Paul Kennedy still here? Okay. Paul Kennedy is our Director of Gas Operations, and I'm going to have him come up and speak to that. I'm not as familiar with the service territory, related to gas. What I may do is just have him get specifically with you to try to explain and answer your...
The community's willing to pay to be run from the mains to our houses. That's no problem.
Okay.
But the problem is getting the mains run, because we'd be told, well, you're outside of Ponder proper, but we're not in anybody else proper either.
Okay.
We live in Denton County.
Okay. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, if Paul is not here, I want to get your information. He will be the guy that can get with your community to try to get you an answer on this.
All right. Thank you.
I have I guess it's a 3-part question, but the third part relies on the first 2. I was wondering what the cost of the Sandy Creek plant is, including the distribution running to the plant.
Okay, hey, Curtis or Clyde, do you know the final cost on Sandy Creek, all-in capital costs? I'm thinking between $2,500 and $3,000 per kW is what I recall. Clyde, does that sound right? Clyde is our director from CoServ on the Brazos board. Now, the other part of your question that kind of stumped me just a little bit, you said including all of the distribution costs?
Well, you're building a plant, and there weren't power lines going to the space where the plant is before the plant was there.
Okay, are you talking about the transmission lines?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and I do not have any of the numbers. I think transmission was already there, and it would just intersected existing transmission infrastructure. Now, there may have been a generation step-up transformer. I do not know that cost. I'll try to find out. I'm sure it's in a few millions of dollars, as opposed to Sandy Creek overall being approximately $1 billion asset.
So we're talking billions and millions. How much is the solar panel program?
Now, are you talking about
or any local generation program?
Okay. I cannot speak to what the actual costs are. I can tell you what we're providing as a credit. We're providing $2.50 per watt. I don't think that covers all of the costs that we're seeing. I've seen everything from $7 to $10 per watt installed within the last year. Curtis he'll have a little bit more information, and when he gets through with this member, I'll have him give you some specific answers about the cost. Curtis, his question is, what is the cost of solar, installed? Last I recall was between 7 and 10 a watt. Is that?
Well, instead of dealing with in terms of dollars per watt versus billions of dollars, how much is, you have this program where you're crediting back money, but it doesn't actually cost you money because, in essence, that energy is going into the pool that you sell to everyone else who is a customer. It seems like rather than spend billions of dollars to build a new plant depending upon a fossil fuel that, as we've seen, is dependent upon fluctuations of the market and the demand and the capacity and how much is available, that if you took a fraction of that and put it into saying, hey, listen, we're going to take every customer and we're going to say, here's a package of solar cells that we'll put on your house, and that will lessen the demand on the grid and the need for coal or gas.
Well, first of all, I mean, coal is a baseload fuel, and so solar is just a daytime resource.
When is the highest demand, day or night?
In the daytime.
Okay, so that would be
it's in the late afternoon, in the 5:30 to 6:30 time frame in the summertime. And if you take a solar panel, a fixed solar panel, you'll get about 40% of its maximum rated output at that time of day. Now, solar is an intermittent resource, and cloud cover affects it. The cost to do distributed solar like you're talking about is going to be somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 a kW, versus for a coal plant in the $2,500 to $3,000 a kW. Plus solar is only going to give you energy production during the daylight hours. Cloud cover is going to impact solar. One of the concerns that we have about high penetration of distributed solar is that we have no way to control the output of that solar. So when you get intermittent cloud cover coming across the solar panels, you get what I call very rapid ramp rates up, ramp rates down, and that creates some pretty severe power quality issues that we have to be able to deal with in a widely distributed type scenario. So there's two things that I think that we have to have, either one or both, in order for solar to be a viable resource for us, high penetration. And one is that we have to have the ability to control those individual widely distributed solar panels to control the output. The second thing that we may have to have, or that could help to solve that problem, is we have to have a significant amount of energy storage. So at $4,000 to $5,000 a kW, now you add additional controls, now you add energy storage. Now you're looking at a lot of dollars that compared to the cost of conventional generation, is going to be much more costly.
I see your points, but also to the $3,000 versus the $4,000, $4 to $5, that you just pointed out. I feel that if you were to add storage, like Google has these big, battery banks outside to manage their storage needs. Mm-hmm. There are technologies available that won't be, because we're talking about this coal plant for the next 30 years, that won't be under more stringent FDA regulations and possible problems a decade from now. So when you look at a longer-term solution for the entire CoServ population, you have coal, which is getting stricter and stricter and stricter, and solar, which is, are they going to say, there's really almost no way to put a stricter regulation on solar or wind or, any of the natural. I just think in terms of a longer-term investment that is, future-proof almost. Obviously everything wears out. It just, the money spent pays off longer with a renewable resource versus coal, which, as we know, is every 20, 30 years, that regulation comes down. Now it has to meet this. Now it has to meet this. Now it has to meet this.
I think that at some point in the future that solar is a viable resource. It's just not ready for prime time today. I think the cost will continue to come down. I think the inverter manufacturers will add capabilities to the electronic controls that allow the utility to manage that output of those solar panels. It's just not there today. There's also a federal, state, or a local, maybe all three, policy issue that has to be addressed. Installing solar panels on somebody's rooftop If the utility owns the solar, we have a solar resource that's owned on property that we don't control or own. So there's a lot of issues. Even the act of actually controlling a utility controlling a solar panel that's owned by a customer, there's some issues there with, do we really have the right to do that? Is the customer going to allow us to do that? So there's a lot of issues here that have to be worked out, cost being one, energy storage being another, that have to happen before we can really rely on that as a viable resource. Now, I think it's coming. I think somewhere down the road it will be viable and we'll be able to make a wise investment there at some point in the future.
Well, I just look forward to more investment in that strategy versus the billions spent on coal, which we don't know what the long-term payoff is going to be.
Up on the screen is an information that Kat Gloria, our communications director, has pulled, I think, off of our website, right? Kat, is that correct? And there's some additional information that might provide some information to you. Sounds like we're going to have, extended dialogue. I think we got a good feel for what your concerns and thoughts are about what we need to be planning from a generation supply standpoint. In the interest of trying to get through, let me see if we've got other members. Stick around and give us an opportunity to get back to you.
I believe I read the other day that there's some thought or perhaps pending legislation that talks about the installation of smart meters and being able to opt out. Did you see that? And if you did, can you comment on where that is and if that's going to have any impact on the direction that you're taking or not?
Let me tell you what I've read so far. What I've read so far is that there was one legislator whose name I can't recall said that he was going to introduce legislation if the Public Utility Commission didn't address this. And my understanding is that the Public Utility Commission of Texas has begun the process of trying to promulgate a rule on opting out of advanced meters, or smart meters as they're called. Yeah. Well, CoServ's business plan and the meters that we're installing are identical to what Encore and CenterPoint have installed in Texas, and they've now got, I think, Stacia, was like 5.5 million. Is that right? Around 5.5 million of those Landis and Gear focus meters, installed. I do not think it's going to have a material impact. I think the commission's rule will give people the ability to say, okay, I don't want that meter, and it hopefully will establish what the cost or tariff or provisions are for someone that would say, I don't want that. My understanding is that California adopted an opt-out provision. What I can't say today, because I don't recall the details, whether it was legislation or a regulatory rule, and my recollection is it was a regulatory rule.
In legal fees to get injunctions on people who you have installed these orange so-called safety lights in their backyards. There's only one light in this whole building that's as bright as those, and it's right up here. Mine, the one that I complained about and that I've filed a court case against, is 375 feet from my back window. I asked your staff numerous times to please, please, please put a shade on that light. Now they say, even though you put up the light, they say they can't do that without the neighbor's permission. And I'd invite anybody in here to go up to the door of the people that have this light and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this light, because what you're going to hear is, ain't nobody telling me what to do, so I'm screwed. And I don't think there's anything that you can do about it now, but please, and for God's sake, don't put up any more of these orange safety lights that put off this kind of brightness. You can't take it. You can't look. If it was behind my face right now, you wouldn't be able to see me talking.
I know we've had conversations, or I'm familiar with, you live in Rome.
Yeah,
correct?
That's right.
And let me just speak to several things. One of them is, of course, some of the wording on our tariff for lighting says security lighting. And so members that come to us and say, and we provide these services and rates on a non-discriminatory basis, for the members. And so if they request the light, we install the light that was in our tariff.
Why, I hate to interrupt, but why does it have to be that bright? You don't see those lights that bright in other parts of the country.
That is the standard light that we have utilized that the overwhelming majority of our members have been satisfied with. Now, I understand that there are neighbors in some areas.
It's 9,800 lumens.
And
that's like 4 times brighter than a mercury vapor light.
And one of the things that we've done is as you mentioned, we put a shield on the light. And the shield that we put is a standard shield.
Yeah, but you don't have any shield on this light. And not only that, after I and a neighbor complained and had bitter conversations with your staff, your crew came out and put another one in the neighborhood.
And I understand it's not satisfactory to you. I mean, that is abundantly clear to me is what your feelings are about that. But to get to the question that you raised about the member that is paying for the light, one of the things that happens, once we've installed the shield to try to address the light issue from your perspective, the question then becomes, how much are they willing to allow us to restrict the light for the reason that they bought the light in the first place?
They're not going to do that any more than they're going to let you put a muzzle on their pit bulldog.
I'm definitely interested and willing in getting someone to come back out. I'm not sure that you're willing to allow us to do that.
You can do anything you want. I'm going to court next month, but if you want to stop that court case, get a shield put on that light, if you would, please.
Okay, thank you.
I'll let somebody else talk.
Smart meters that you're installing in our homes are the same ones that have been installed in the Dallas area that we heard so much about in the news that residents were complaining that weren't accurate?
The complaints that occurred at the initial installation of Encore, I think that the Public Utility Commission conducted a study, as I recall, and I think the results of the study were every one of the meters were accurate. Is that correct?
That's correct. The meters were determined to be accurate. There were some issues with the meter exchange process for some of those people that had high bills. Basically, there was an error on the read-in, read-out of the old meter. Now, what we've done is created some additional processes around the meter exchange to avoid having that issue. If you read the meter wrong on the old meter, you're going to get a bad bill, right? So that's what was happening with the Encore installation. What we do is we take a digital picture of the old meter, and we put the new meter in, we take another digital picture, and we store those digital pictures so we have a reference to go back to if there's any question about the meter reading when we do the meter exchange.
I do think that the process that Encore went through, what Curtis was talking about, us taking an image, that's what we learned from them in their installation. By not getting the meter readings correct when they were removing and installing, I think it gave people the idea that the meters were inaccurate.
Yeah, we're thinking about putting some solar and wind at our residence. How would these rolling blackouts affect our power? Are we going to just have none since we're feeding the grid basically?
I'll let you answer that.
See if this.
Let me. This is Curtis. This is Curtis Trivett. Curtis is our senior vice president of engineering and energy services. And let me tell you one thing about him. He not only is a really smart guy, he participates on our behalf in cooperative research networks. So he is plugged into a substantial amount of information on research regarding renewables and storage and other things. But he's very equipped, I think, to answer your question.
Wind generators and solar generation that you would install at your home have an inverter because those types of generation produce DC, so that the inverter converts from DC to AC. Now, those inverters have a feature called line commutation, so that if you don't have AC power from the utility present, then those devices won't produce any power. So in the event of a rolling back blackout, if your power goes off, so does your generation in that case. You would have to have other means, batteries or something like that.
Bus transfer for a generator or
something like that, yes. So, transfer switch where you could have other generation, something like that would keep it up.
What it's worth, most of the distributed generation generators, like the waste heat recovery process at one of the landfills that we serve, requires interconnection. They lose the grid, they lose the ability to power. I saw another one person, I think, that was right here.
With Twitter or web pages to notify us of upcoming blackouts. I know last summer we would get warnings in the morning we need to conserve, but then is there any way of giving me any kind of warning, a 20-minute warning or something like that, that it's going to happen? And then can you, by Twitter, tell us, because we're going to be looking at this information on our phones. We're not going to be able to access it for the most part on our PCs. So is there a way of having a dedicated web page that we can go that has little graphics, it'll download quickly, and we can get information on how long a blackout's going to last and what area is going to be next? Just to know something in those times is more comforting than not knowing anything.
Yeah, and the answer to that question, and Kat right now is pulling up our Facebook page, and I believe, are you guys sending out tweets too on events? So the answer is yes. And if you'll do...
We don't get warnings that it's going to happen in 20 minutes. Is there a possibility of doing that?
Well, go ahead.
There is a new app that you can now download for free from ERCOT. It's called the ERCOT. Cat, help me.
I looked at it today.
I have it on my phone actually. ERCOT Energy Saver, and it will give you alerts or alarms if they're based on what condition the ERCOT grid is in. So that's a possibility that will give you maybe a little advance.
ERCOT now hands out, I mean, they send out notices hours in advance to anybody that you can go out on the ERCOT website and subscribe to these. But, you know, as Curtis said, they just released the app this week that would allow you to get it on your smartphone. So there are ways. Kat, you have some things to...
And also, if ERCOT sends a message to CoServ, we're going to retweet or share that message on our Facebook page or on our Twitter account. So whichever one of those social media platforms you prefer, we'd like you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. But any message that comes from ERCOT, we're going to, just as quickly as we can, disseminate that information out to you.
Curtis is showing him the app or something. Be sure and get his name so we can follow up with him to make sure he gets the information. Yes, sir.
Sure, but I do recall a few years ago there was buzz about the possibility of the internet over the electrical line. Did that technology just prove to not be there?
It was called broadband over power line, and they're still really struggling to get that technology to deliver a significant amount of bandwidth. I think that they've got it. You know, there's Manassas, Virginia is a town that actually provides broadband over power line, and there's some other communities, and I think there's even a few cooperatives that are experimenting with it. It is incredibly difficult to deliver large bandwidth on that, and part of the reasons are because now all the things that go on in a power distribution system, they just haven't been able to get significant bandwidth like what you and I are now accustomed if you're downloading YouTubes or any videos or things like that. So I think they're still working with it, but they just haven't gotten over the threshold of what I would call significant digital broadband.
Okay, thank you. One follow-up, if I could, on the smart meter. I have been in some meetings recently where some people are passing resolutions and things, and it has very little to do with the accuracy. It has to do with the privacy issue of looking into it. So I'm pretty sure that there is going to be a serious legislation filed. And I just want to make sure that y'all are prepared in case this goes the wrong way.
We are, and Texas is not going to undo 5.5 million meters installed. And let me tell you that no meter has the ability to look inside someone's home or to violate privacy at the level that I think some people have expressed concern about. This is all about information usage, and the way CoServ is approaching this, we're not going to be doing anything with that usage that you as a member of the members don't direct us to do. It's only going to be information that we're trying to make available to you because of where we see the industry going. And let me just draw a connection with this gentleman's concern about blackouts and things like that. One of the things that ERCOT said about last year's February rolling blackouts, they say that that is a 1 in 10 year event. But when you look at their reserve margins, they are so slim that we are going to be precariously close to rolling blackouts, I think, this year, and I think for certain next year. And if that happens, I mean, what are going to be the things that drive people to different usage? And it's going to be, we think there's going to be more movement toward pricing on time of use. And the question for us is what's going to be our members' takedown rate of a rate option like that. So I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do is with our advanced metering is to provide a web portal for members to get information about their uses that helps them make decisions to manage their energy and their cost.
On the news were that people were complaining that their bills were consistently, shockingly higher with the smart meters than they had been before. Now, if that's the case, I mean, are you having these complaints with the meters that you're having now?
I'm not aware of any. I think most of the ones that I was familiar with, and the question was, the question was regarding smart meters with some of the media coverage about bills being significantly higher than they were before the smart meter was installed. Do we have any concerns, about that? Everything that we've seen so far, the higher usage has been tied to one of several things. One was what we thought was anomalous usage in terms of the time of year that the meters were installed. The other thing was the meter exchange process that we think created a lot of problems. And I'm not even sure most of the utilities, have got it right yet. I think that we're pretty sensitive. I'm not going to say we're not going to have, issues with the installation, but I think that we've tried to take the lessons learned from the other utilities that have installed these to try to reduce those types of impacts. Curtis, would you like to add something?
We have a copy of that PUC report out on our website. They did a very thorough investigation of all the complaints that they received on the smart meter installations regarding much higher than normal bills. If you'd like to go out to our website, go to the EcoGrid section, right, and it's called the Navigant Consulting Report. But you can read all of the details about what they found and what they, how much of it was fact, how much of it was fiction, that kind of thing. So you can see all the details of the report and what their results of their investigation of that issue was. Navigant was an independent consultant that the PUC engaged to investigate that issue.
Let me repeat her question was, were there any tests that were conducted by the manufacturer? And let me say one of the things that we designed in our business plan on the deployment, you might need to help me out on this, in terms of explaining the quarantine process and the test, because I think this is very important to your question.
Every truckload of meters that we receive from the manufacturer for this deployment, we take a sample of those meters and we do an independent accuracy test. So we're confirming the accuracy of the meters. It's a random sample that confirms that the meters coming out of the factory are accurate. That's one other additional step that we take.
We've got a video we can show if you guys would like to see that. it's a 2-minute video on that quarantine process. Is that something you guys are interested in seeing? Okay, well, if you'll go out and look at that, that might provide some additional information for you. Any other questions?
We three ladies live on Deer Hollow Drive in Little Elm. We have an opposite problem as the gentleman with the security light. We have lamps that seem to be in code in that they're about 300 feet apart, but they are clear globes over yellow lights that the lumens just aren't adequate enough. If you're standing directly under the light, you can see. Otherwise, it's not enough for our community.
Okay, can we get somebody, I want to get your names so that we can get somebody out there to look at that. Curtis is going to get the information. We will come out there and work with you guys to figure out what we need to do.
That'd be great, because they tell us we can't have any more lamps on our street, and it's clearly dark. You go around the corner and you're black until you hit another light, and you might get some shine,
Her comment was they're concerned about wanting additional lighting in the area where they live, and that in other parts of their neighborhood have it. I think, if I'm speaking out of turn regarding your HOA or POA covenant, or something is restricting, you think, your ability, but you feel like that comparing the lighting usage of your neighbors in your HOA, you want to be able to have the same type of lighting.
We have talked to the city, and they say that we have enough lamps on our street to sufficiently light us up.
Okay, that the problem is the globe.
And
okay.
Yeah, if that's the case, we need that guy, and we need his.
We'll take his lamp.
We'll have somebody come out and check the lights to make sure that they're putting out the proper amount of light.
That'd be great.
It could be that there's a problem with the bulb or the ballast. We can check that and see.
It's our whole community, the whole.
We'll check it.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And I was just wondering, was CoServ involved, or are we involved with the 3 big windmills across the freeway there, or is that just a UNT project?
That was UNT, and I think, Curtis, that's all served by DME. CoServ had no involvement in the windmills by the football Coliseum.
Not that we want or plan on getting rid of CoServ in our homes, but you had made a comment, or it was on the video, that I've heard other people say, I'm going to opt out of the electricity company. And if that was something that somebody elected to do, did you say that that was irrevocable? You could not then come back and join CoServ?
Yeah, let me explain about last year during the legislative session, and this will partly explain my answer, I think, to your question. There was legislation that wanted to give schools in Texas choice with municipal entities and electric cooperatives that had not opted into deregulation. Well, you can't do that. I mean, there's just no physical way to separate out and give certain people choice in a distribution system. It's either you're all in or not. Well, one of the things that, because of that very aspect of not being able to target people that could choose or not, CoServ's decision is an all or nothing decision to opt in. It is an irrevocable. This is a genie you don't put back in the bottle, and that's why our board, is very, very adamant about, where we're at in terms of the generation resources that we have with Brazos, where we see the market today, where we think and see the market headed, that our members are going to be exposed to some volatility, and they want to make sure that we do the analysis to say to them that this is in the members' best interest, that they can actually get lower costs in a competitive market, because it is an irrevocable decision. Appreciate the time that you've taken to talk with us and let us know what your questions and comments are. I'll turn the meeting back over to the chairman, Leon Pelzel.